Hey guys, episode 20 of the Coach Cast. We have Brandon Wynn, also known as the Lord of the Rings, 6-time USA Rings champion, Pan American Games champion. He's joining us with his mother, Lorraine, and we're talking about the health and wellness once again in this series about athletes and whose responsibility it really is. Enjoy.
The subject here, and we clearly defined this last week when we were talking with an Olympic gold medalist. I don't know what year now. I don't recall. Jay Barr, an archer, and he was talking about his experiences, and we talked with his coach some weeks ago, Dick Tone, who was also Casey Kuffelt's coach and trainer in part. Casey is the young woman in our area here. Her parents own the local archery store, Lancaster Archery Supply, and hopefully, if all things working right, we will have them on next week talking about the same subject, which is the athlete's fitness, overall fitness, and whose responsibility is it? And I think last week we pretty clearly defined, as Frank's saying, the responsibility really comes down eventually to the athlete, him or herself, but certainly the parent or guardian of that person and their coach. It is not the venues, those are businesses, and athletes become the commodity that they are selling. And that sets them up in a sense wide open for some very sticky things that can happen, because when you are selling a commodity, you want to sell your commodity and make a profit. And so this brings us to the subject, and certainly what happened just over a week ago now, when Simone stepped down briefly, what which I understood was for her own protection. This helped really bring things to the foreground. So this is the way we're looking at things here. So in this case, we have a parent and an Olympian who have seen their way through this whole development over many years. How many Olympics, Brandon?
I trained and competed through 3 Olympic cycles, never competed in any of the games, but 12 years of Olympic preparation.
Okay. And I so and we may refer to your on LinkedIn. There's some very nice things said about you, and so
Hmm.
we'll probably refer to some of those things in our introduction as well. And so you're what we would call the mature athlete.
Hmm.
And having known you for many years, I know that you've taken that on as your own personal responsibility, your own health and fitness, and you've
Yes,
done an incredible job. And
thank
so
you.
this is what we're addressing this next week. If we have the Cuffles on, this young woman's only 16, and she wants to continue. They have a long way to go. So we're looking at it on both ends of the continuum.
Back with another episode. This is episode 20 of the Archery Coach Cast. It's a little bit different, and different because we don't have archers on the podcast this time. Instead, we have some experienced individuals, especially when it comes to really dealing with the trials and tribulations of being an elite level athlete. So Doc, this one hits home for you. So I'm going to have you take the reins. I want you to introduce our guest and we can go from there.
Well, our guests today are Lorraine DAversa, who is the mother of Brandon Wynn, a very accomplished gymnast, internationally accomplished. We'll mention some of his credentials here in a few minutes. And the three of us have known each other for a long time. And there was a point in time for a number of years that we were family when Brandon was quite young, and then we chose to go our separate ways. And It was not really a tumultuous kind of thing. It was just a change happened and it was time to move on. Brandon was going off to Ohio State, which is not a real shabby school. I've heard of it. And so we'll
We're
sort
in
of
Penn
take
State country. Be careful with that.
I've heard of Penn State, and it's very close to the state pen, actually. It's just up
Yeah,
the river.
they're only a few miles apart.
Yeah, how many?
A few miles apart.
A few miles, okay. So, but I had the really delightful experience to get to know Brandon at a young age and see him develop, and see him and the relationship between parent and child, or parents and child, as he developed, and as he started his formal training in archery and took it very, very seriously. I remember at one point he was a very accomplished in soccer, and he had to make a decision: am I going to go this route or that route? And because time would not permit for both. So I saw those decisions happen, and it was overall a very, very good experience for all of us. I think the only hopefully important part I played in this was occasionally getting him back and forth from practices as a taxi driver, and one time as his dirt bike mechanic when I was helping him adjust the clutch on his dirt bike, and we had an opportunity to have a little talk. And I remember, Brandon, you saying, Richard, I really hate school. and I have some interest in that category myself. I guess I would have said hate probably at that time, but and I pointed out to you that, and you said, but I love gymnastics, and I really do well at gymnastics. And I suggested to you that if you can do well in one thing, you can do well in the other. It's a matter of priorities and interest and how to balance your time. And from that time on, I recall, until you graduated from high school, you weren't a stellar student, but you weren't falling behind, and you were getting decent grades. Your record, according to LinkedIn, has you graduating finally with a master's degree in business management from Ohio State with, and this must be a misprint, a 3.8, which isn't too shabby. So it sounds like that little comment that day maybe had some meaning, I hope.
Definitely.
And the three of us have remained friends ever since.
Yes.
So here's the topic then. Whose responsibility is it? And how did you two, especially with just me way over here in the corner, manage this relationship over the years? And what would you recommend to others?
So I could start a little bit, and then Mom, you and I can go back and forth. To answer your question initially, whose responsibility is it? My take is it's absolutely the athlete's responsibility. I have never thought of it in the context of responsibility. So now that I'm thinking about, Mom, how we did this, we kind of, I don't know that we divvied it up when in a sense that who is responsible for what things. We kind of just attacked it together. It was the responsibility of the team. How do you feel about that?
I agree. So it was the responsibility of the team, and being fully connected and empathetic with each other as to what each of us needed to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So you always loved going to practice. You always loved going to practice, and that was your stance. So I never really needed to get involved with saying, oh, you should go to practice, or maybe you shouldn't go to practice. You always knew what you needed to do.
Right.
And I was that person that was supporting you in that.
Yeah.
So I feel that we had an understanding, and maybe in part, Bran, I never made it about me in any way as being this parent of a gymnast.
You didn't.
Does not come into play. What
Yeah.
comes into play is being sensitive enough as the athlete, as the parent, to do what we needed to do.
Yeah.
And we did it. We did it. It was lots of fun and it was ever changing, but we did it. And I feel blessed for this opportunity.
Yeah. And to bring it back to the topic of whose responsibility is it? I mean, I think in any sense, this responsibility is always going to be on the person that wants the outcome, right? If nobody's coming, I always like to use the phrase, nobody's coming to save you. Nobody's going to create this outcome for you. And if you're the athlete and you want to have this experience, it's up to you to activate all the modalities possible and take on the responsibility to have your experience be what you want it to be. And the fact that we have this incredible support from coaches and parents, those are great tools that we can use to help accelerate our experience and our progress. But it is all on us, and it's on us to activate those tools and use those tools properly and form good relationships and figure that out. I just think at a young age, understanding that is so important, because nobody's ever going to do it for you. And even if they do it for you, they'll get you to 90%. They'll never get you over the hump to actually creating this exceptional result, because you're not there monitoring all the pieces.
That's an excellent point. And as I look back, you were always the one because you wanted that outcome. So you did whatever it took to gain that outcome. And me as your mom, I did whatever it took to be the mom that you needed.
Right.
You know, and I think parents don't understand that. Our role, you know, as a parent is to be the parent that the kid needs, and the kid, the athlete, needs to be the person that does what is needed to reach that outcome.
Interesting. Do you think that a big part of this is you fully wanted me to do and have the experience that I wanted to have, and you were supporting me in my experience instead of you deciding what experience you wanted me to have? Do you think that affects how you supported me?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So I supported you in getting the experience that you wanted to have.
And then on the other side of it, maybe you see parents that are like, well, I really want my kid to have this experience. I want him to have a full scholarship to a D1 school, or I want him to be elite, or I want him to win the Olympics. And maybe the parent driving that is what really breaks apart the unity of being able to move forward.
Exactly. Because the parent thinks in that situation, they know what the kid needs. They really don't know what the kid needs.
No.
They need to be quiet. They need to observe, and they need to understand it's all about the kid and what he needs. And what
You guys are slowly encroaching on a very important topic that we run into in competitive archery, youth archery, all the way up through their teens. And Larry, I know that you want to, I could see the smoke coming from your ears. So why don't you speak to that a little bit?
Well, I had a question, actually. Was there ever a time, Brandon, where you doubted that you wanted this outcome?
Seriously, no. There were definitely times where I said I doubted if I wanted the outcome, just kind of as this emotional overreaction, and almost me wanting to play with the idea of what it would even feel like for a split second to consider not chasing the outcome, but never seriously doubted it. No.
Yeah. I too, when I got home from losing a tournament, bad experience maybe, that next day, why am I doing this? But by Tuesday, I had stuff to do. I had improvement that I had to get on. And I always felt very fortunate that I had that feeling, 2 days after the tournament, win or lose, I had stuff to work on.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate of that. And I had good support. Of course, I was an adult. So my parents weren't involved. Okay. But my wife certainly has been. And so that afforded me the opportunity to get to work on getting improvement. Yeah.
I think that's an interesting point, because I do see a lot of athletes like that. And then there's some athletes that are on the other side. For me, I think the difference is the athletes that are like how you described yourself and how I describe myself is you're uninhibited. Your energy flow and drive towards what you're doing is uninhibited. And I think the more people try to over-involve themselves in the outcome that you're creating, it inhibits you and it stops that energy flow. And I think you're hitting on something super important. That energy flow and that internal drive, that uninhibited ability to just chase something that you find enjoyable is the only thing that makes you win. It's not the modalities or these incredible support systems underneath of you. It's that, and then everything else supports it.
I heard it interesting. I forget where I heard it years ago. But the person who wins, or you see several people competing, and the announcer says, well, he wanted it more than the other guy. How about he needed it more than the other guy? Everybody wants it.
Right.
Who really needs it?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a nice difference to point out. Who really needs it? Who needs to compete and to try to win in order to complete themselves?
Yeah, it's definitely a very strong driving force.
Right. Yeah. So that attests to that same internal drive. Yeah. Yeah, I was fortunate to compete against other guys who had that same drive. And we made each other better because I knew I couldn't go to a tournament not prepared.
Yeah, because you know they're coming.
Because they were going to be prepared.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a drive. But in coaching, our national junior dream team for 5 years, I was one of the assistant coaches. Our head coach is Linda Beck from Minnesota. Now that program has ended, and now they've gone into 6 different regional kind of teams. But we tried to incorporate the parents who were there at the camp. So we had a 2-day, 3-day, 4-day camp. Parents would be there. We tried to incorporate them into, well, helping with lunch, of course, but into our classroom sessions, because we had classroom sessions. Tried to keep them short, but a couple in the morning, a couple in the afternoon. So their schedule was always moving, changing. But we wanted the parents involved, because if they got smarter, then they would help the child reach the child's goal.
Yeah.
And we unfortunately ran into parents who wanted the child to reach the parent's goal.
I was waiting for you to bring that up or segue to that, because we see that a ton in JOAD, in S3DA, in any of the youth sports where parents have a direct involvement in some way. Lorraine sort of, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lorraine, but Lorraine sort of alluded to, like, I facilitated what my child wanted, not what I wanted. And that's where, and I grew up in a gymnastics gym until about 10 years old. My sister was an elite level coach. She coached at Penn State University. She coached all over the country, Virginia Beach, Hawaii. My other sister and my dad both were involved. My dad was a coach, and hearing what goes on, you see these parents who try to control every aspect of what their youth athlete is doing, instead of kind of letting the cards fall where they call and let their training and their coaching and their experience lead them down the path. And as you get older, that parent, depending on what the child's drive is in that youth, during those youth years, will very much dictate what happens then as they get older. Are they going to maintain that drive, or are they going to burn out? And a lot of times the athletes that burn out are the ones that were driven by the parents' goals and not their own goals.
Yes.
You guys agree with that, or want to comment to that?
I totally agree. I think, and me and my mom probably have a ton of stuff on that point to go back and forth about. But I just want to mention something quickly, and then I also want to hear what she has to say about this, because she did such an incredible job of planting a seed and helping me with the fundamentals, but then not over control. So how do you really, really want something for your child, but not try to take control of it and reach across the table and hold the outcome close to your chest and guarantee a result, but want it more for them than anybody else on planet Earth, but you're not controlling the result. And that takes an incredible degree of self-awareness, emotional intelligence, the whole bit of being able to do that as an individual, as a parent, which is, I don't know how she did it. But I just want to mention one thing about burnout. So burnout, I think, comes from you as an athlete having to do something you don't want to do. That's burnout. That's, people talk about business burnout and athlete burnout. You're doing something you don't want to do. Well, why don't you want to do it? It's probably because at some point somebody took the ability for you to make the choice to do it away from you at some point in your career. You wanted to do it, then somebody took that away from you and said, well, that's great, you want to do it. I'm going to make you do it whether you want to or you don't want to, because I'm on my own agenda. And then even if you had that natural flow of energy of wanting to do it, eventually you will burn out because it's no longer your choice. So I'll just say that, and then I want to hear my mom's opinion on this.
That makes perfect sense, Bran. What I've been thinking about is the fact that we were not fearful. You have to let fear not play into it and know that it's going to work out no matter what. And you don't truly know the definition of what working out is. But we were never fearful. And my goal was to just be there so you can be that amazing person that you are. And time again, you showed me what it was that you wanted to accomplish, who it is that you are. So I was supporting you in expressing that. Just a little step back, when you were 2 years old and you were flipping on the couch and Grandpa said, oh, you got to stop him, he's going to get hurt. I said, no, Dad, I'm just going to make sure he's fully present, that he is there when he's doing what he's doing. And, you know, we were silly people too. We ran around the house singing, you know, at the top of our lungs, we were playing our favorite music. I think it's about just being okay, being who you are. And I was so okay in supporting you and who you are. You promised to never lie to me about important stuff. So I knew what was going on, and I was going to be there for you and support you in being who you are. I mean, there are parents that said, how could you let him do this? Why would you let him do that? And I was like, we're cool. We're handling it. Everything is okay. I hope that answered the question. I can get a little off track.
No, that was good. In regards to not being fearful, I think that we see where parents sort of shelter their kids from taking a loss. And when it comes to archery, I see this pretty often in my experience as a coach, where they enroll kids, like they'll shoot in a different class so that they can podium, because they don't want their child to lose.
Take a beat down.
Yeah, like they don't like, or they'll pick and choose tournaments where there's not a lot of people in the category. You know, it's not about shooting archery for the joy of archery. It's shooting archery because they're taking advantage of the opportunity of the good feeling that comes from winning, but they don't ever experience losing. So when the time comes that they lose, they don't know how to handle it, or they don't know how to respond to it, learn from it. You know, and I say it to the kids that I coach and just overall in general, you don't truly learn to appreciate winning until you learn to lose, how to accept losing. You don't have to be okay with it. You shouldn't be okay with it. And like what Brandon and Larry were talking about, like your response within the next 24 hours is going to have a huge impact on what you're going to do the next time you compete. Yeah. But you also have to realize that losing And parents have to also kind of adhere to this thought process that losing doesn't define who you are as an individual. What you do on a gymnastics floor, on the rings, on the vault, or on the archery field, the competition field or course or whatever the situation may be, doesn't define you. And it should also not define, in my opinion, your relationship with your parents at that venue as part of your career, and so on and so forth. And the long-term effects of the negative side of that on that athlete is ultimately going to also produce the burnout.
Yeah.
You can't live in that world for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll offer my daughter as a good example here. She competed in her mid-teens, 15, 16, 17, competed in archery. My son did later, than 10 years later when he was that age. But so we went to a world championship in Darrington, Washington, World Field Championship. And so she had to compete for 5 days. And that, that alone, sending a 15-year-old out by themselves to compete for 5 days, 8 hours a day, that takes, a really great young teenager to do that. But she was out, competed every day. There was this blonde girl who was eventually the eventual winner, whose mom was along on the chorus with her, helping her keep her makeup right. But anyhow, this blonde girl won at the end of the week. My daughter finished third. She seethed all winter about this, and until the next spring. And then it was time to get ready for field archery again and go to the next championship, which was in New York State. So the first day of that championship, she had the same girl in her group. And by the 10th target, my daughter had crushed her and went on to win the national championship in that age group. But, had I tried to protect her, had I been the one out there with her on the course, I don't know how that would have fared out.
Yeah.
But
and I think,
she took a beating, didn't like it, and then prepared herself for the next year. Yeah. The third year she competed, then at 17, she set some record scores and won again. But then that was the end of archery. So, but I told both my kids, you don't have to shoot archery to make me happy. You shoot archery if it makes you happy. And when it doesn't, it's okay. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think from a macro view, not to zoom out too much, but I really think a parent's job, and Mom, I guess this is what you did, is you really just took on the responsibility of cultivating my authentic energy as much as possible, wherever that may lead. That's it. That's like all we're doing. And if we really start at the very, very top and ask ourselves what we want as individuals, what we want for our kids, it's exactly that. I want my kid to become the most authentic, original version of who they truly are. That's what equals happiness. That's what births all these incredible experiences. It's not an Olympic gold medal, or it's not $1 billion or whatever it is. It's the most authentic version. The cool thing is that when you're the most authentic, unique, original version of who you are, you bring the most unique value, which generally generates the most awards in this human experience. So that ends up getting you to where you need to be anyways. I just think that the second you zoom in any more granular from the macro goal of cultivating the most authentic energy for your child, the second you zoom in and try to micromanage each of these variables, you're breaking the flow of what's going to create an incredible result for your child. You just can't do it. And that's what you did, Mom. You said, look, he's crazy. He's going to run around and do all these incredible things. And I'm just not going to hinder that at all. I'm going to keep that fire burning and that energy flowing. So think about how cultivating that organic energy flow has now transitioned from sport to entrepreneurship to so many different things. And now that we're rounding this out, all I do every morning is wake up and get that flow flowing. The actual work tasks that I complete aren't as relevant as being in an abundant energy, of feeling that energy flow and then allowing that flow to set fire to any path that I decide to put in my way. So it's so hard to not be granular because we want to be mathematic and systematic about the way that we help people, but it's cultivating authentic energy flow.
Yeah.
Exactly, Brand. That's perfectly put. Thank you.
You know, one of the things that I found over the years, been around people in sports or other kinds of endeavors. I was thinking as I was listening here in terms of academics. I mean, there are people that face their studies, especially after the required formal schooling, and they're going off to university or something, and they have to get that A. And they'll do exactly what's necessary to get the A without really learning how to get an A or how to study something and make it part of themselves. I was thinking of a friend of mine years ago. We ended up in the same, I took some classical languages. I met this fellow, we ended up in Greek class. And Greek is a hard language to learn for a person that barely spoke English. And there I was sitting in the class trying to learn this stuff, but I took it on because I wanted to learn it. I found it interesting. And my friend Bob was his name. He had been a very good student, and he always got an A every time, an A on the tests and on the exams. And I, years later, 40, 50 years later, he and I were sitting and having a discussion. We both became theologians and so forth before I went on to other things. And he asked me something about a scripture passage, and I quoted it to him in Greek. And he said, how do you know that in Greek? And I said, well, I studied it years ago, and I learned that passage in Greek. And he said, I don't even remember us doing that. And I said, well, you're the guy that got the A. I probably got a C in the exam. And he said, I said, you got the A. He said, I can't read a line of Greek, not one line of Greek. Because and then he's starting to realize, 50 years later, I studied for the test. And Larry's the preacher on this one. If you're constantly focused on the outcome and not the process that gets you there, and enjoying that and getting a good feeling out of even when the arrows in this case, or occasionally when you slip off the high bar. I can remember you on the pommel horse, when sometimes the pommel horse would kick you, but you were there and you were doing it, and you were part of the process, and you stayed with the process. And Larry is well, the book you've been writing for some time, and now I had to change a little bit. What was a study in visiting and learning from many well-known coaches in various sports. Did they really have a step-by-step process to teach their in this place, in this sense, their players? And many of them had no process at all. It was all, we got to win this game. Isn't that right?
Yeah, the theme that I use when I'm coaching, teaching, writing is based on present process thinking. And Brandon, you already mentioned that. So did Lorraine. You have to be engaged in the process when you're doing it. If you're thinking in the future or about the past, then your mind and your body are out of time phase, and you won't get to your peak, which is the title of my book, Planning to Peak in Archery. but you have to understand what present process thinking is and get yourself there. How do you get yourself there? Well, in archery, we make a list of steps for our form, and we teach from that, and we develop details around that. And through enough practice, parts of that takes on a feel. And so in competition, you have to complete certain parts of your form by feel so that you repeat at your highest level. I worked with coaches and athletes in 7 other sports last year, and trying to develop this same concept with their sport. Not one of them had a list of steps on a piece of paper that they teach. None. 0. I found that shocking and realized I had a lot of work to do here that could transfer to other sports. Because if you don't have a list of steps on paper, how can you know which one's the most important? And how can you communicate about this? So I helped all those coaches build lists and identify the important one, because that's where you've got to be present with the process. Anyway, you mentioned that theme, and I wanted to point that out, and Doc led me into that. It's his fault I got off topic here.
You know, there's a real serious side to this, and certainly Lorraine knows about this because she was a therapist for years, and people who become therapists or practitioners in the health field become aware of this, that if you focus so much on the result, that if you don't get the result, then I'm not as worthy as I wanted to be. There's something wrong with me, and so forth. And just, I think it's now 3 weeks ago, Frank, when we had Gaius Carter on, who's a professional archer. And what a wonderful shot. But every now and then, one of the arrows, either probably he lost his focus or some little thing happened. The release wasn't exactly perfect when he shot. He'll miss the target. And so he was talking about in that particular segment of our work here, what to do when you miss the target. And what he suggested, if I heard him correctly, is you go back to the next step of your process and continue on. Because that's what keeps you going. It's not shooting the 10 or doing all your maneuvers absolutely perfectly. Those are great things to do. But that has very little to do with how you see yourself. How you see yourself is what I know I can do this, but every now and then something's going to happen that it doesn't work. Whatever, you know.
Yeah. This is a very important subject. I grew up my entire life almost having this duality of the people that were making their entire life about the result, and then people telling me to enjoy the process. And at this stage of my life, I didn't understand. And my equation in my head is people telling me to enjoy the process don't know what it's like to win. And the people that don't enjoy the process are the winners. And there is this duality. And I promise you, I think the majority of athletes face this problem right now. It's either foot on the gas, all of my value is tied up in winning, or foot off the gas, foot on the brake, enjoy the process. And what I'm learning in my life right now, and it's taken me my entire life to this stage to really understand this, but there's actually a foot on the gas where you can get the result and enjoy the process. And because you're enjoying the process, you're more likely to reach the result. There is a way to melt the duality of those two things. And it's really hard for people to understand that, but this is the most beautiful thing, that if you're chasing something out of scarcity, saying, I'm going to get this, and if I don't get this, then I'm not valuable, and I'm going to use that scarcity mindset in order to activate me in a fight or flight way to use all of my energy to chase this thing, That's a way that people are motivated. People have won Olympic gold medals like that, but that is more fragile than I'm going to use the pursuit of an Olympic gold medal as a potential primer to have the most potent experience, life experience possible. That is healthy, it's enjoyable, and stronger than the scarcity mindset that if I don't do this, I'm nothing. So there is just this, it's this thing in sport that it's so undercover, people don't get. My entire reasoning for coming back into sport out of retirement was to see if I could chase an Olympic gold medal from a place of abundance and not from a place of scarcity. And if I could learn how to tap into having, enjoying the process, be a different kind of sustainable fuel that's much more potent and powerful than the scarcity mindset. And that was my gold medal of my comeback. And I was able to do that and learn that and have that kind of experience, which was incredible. So this is such a big deal. This person always crashes. I build a hierarchy of motivations, and I've taken a lot of notes, but the hierarchy of motivation starts at these fragile motivations all the way up to, as the ultimate thank you to God or whoever you believe in put you on this earth and everybody that supported me, as the ultimate thank you, I'm going to use the pursuit of an Olympic gold medal to enjoy this life. That is this unbreakable motivation. And it sits at the top of this hierarchy of motivations. So this is such a good subject.
And it's a good subject also because if you see it different than that and see yourself as unworthy if you don't accomplish that, then you set yourself up for all kinds of addictions, because that is the pattern of addiction. If I can do this and this and this and this, I am more able. But if I don't, then there's something wrong with me. I have to have this for me to be better. And looking at it the way you're looking at it there, Brandon, and differentiating between the desire for the accomplishment over the actual enjoyment of getting there, and just really making that part of what motivates you each day. This is where people working in addiction don't get it many times.
Yeah. Sad thing is that a lot of youth athletes aren't able to tap into this. So they're actually developing these patterns. And the second they retire from sport, their life completely falls apart. They're actually much worse off. These super high level successful athletes, when they've used that fragile scarcity motivation, they're actually much worse off than the average person because of the pattern that was developed. And it was developed and satisfied while they were competing. And then no more satisfaction because I'm retired, yet I still have this craving of the scarcity mindset addiction. And it is a recipe for a terrible life until you figure this out for retired athletes.
Yeah.
Yes, Doc and I have a friend
who's to retire, but end up one day when the owner of the team comes over, or the committee comes over and say, we no longer need your services.
Yes.
That's a major crash. And that's often, I've had many people in my practice, golfers, some one football player, a few people in baseball, when they received that call or a letter or whatever, they totally crumbled. One person was very close to suicide because there was nothing to go on for.
Yeah.
Actually, it turned out to be the break of his life. He finally got his life turned around and was doing great.
Always is.
Yeah. Doc and I have a friend that we met a few years ago, and I was able to teach him archery. Is Dr. David Mcduff, who's the sports psychiatrist for the Orioles and also for the Colts. Anyway, 2 years ago when I talked to him, I think it was August 2 years ago, he had been asked by U.S. Olympic Committee to be part of an international group of psychiatrists, psychologists, mental health professionals who were cataloging the mental disorders for elite athletes and trying to build treatments for them, because elite athletes suffer special mental situations. And if if they're locked on to winning and that is their entire life, and then they don't win, boy, that's a big beatdown.
Yeah.
And some don't recover.
Yeah, I
Go
would
ahead.
love to talk to that point a little bit about one of the shooters that I work with. She's 16 years old. She shoots pretty, I'd say she's in women in America, she's probably in the top, I'm gonna say 3 to 5% for scores at 16 of what the women in barebow archery can shoot. And we've had this discussion and I've explained it to her. She's actually at like a pivotal moment where I was in my early teens in archery, where I started to go the opposite direction. I didn't understand. I was one of those ones that peaked real early, was able to win, but didn't understand that taking the L is part of the growth. It's not, doesn't define who you are. And I've had this conversation recently with her where I said, listen, you're at the point where you're sort of near the top already, but it's what you do from this point forward that's going to determine how much you enjoy this process and the path that you're taking. Because a lot of people can get there, but not a lot of people can maintain it. And kind of to the point that you were talking about, that idea of training just to get to a point, what happens after that? What happens when your entire goal was to win a national championship? All right. What do you do after that? How do you maintain it? You know, and I've referenced my friend John Demmer multiple times. There is nobody. You guys don't know John, but when it comes to barebow archery, which is what I compete in and sort of known for in the coaching world more than anything, it's the most difficult style of competitive archery that there is in the World Archery, USA Archery games, and nobody shoots more arrows than this guy. And he's stayed at the top for a very, very, very long time. But people don't realize how much work he put in over the years and how much work he still puts in to maintain that level of competitiveness, which is cool about archery, because age doesn't hurt you like it would in gymnastics. You know, you're not beating your body down as quickly. It's a much slower process, but you can keep up within the competitive world even as you get older. But I say to people all the time, like, that's the difference between someone who's pursuing it for the right reasons and really truly enjoys the process of getting there, and someone who is just results oriented. I need to just win this. And then, so what's your next motivation? I know people have won gold medals that way, I mean, and Jay Bars, who we had on a few weeks ago, kind of referenced that a little bit. He always said, fake it till you make it. That year, every single day, the year before, I think it was the 88 games, like, he told himself, you are going to win the Olympic gold medal. You are going to win the Olympic gold medal every single day. He had index cards that he would read to himself every single day. And just those positive affirmations, that positive self-talk, you are going to do it. He shot those arrows time and time again. So when he walked up there, like, the pressure word that we throw around, we call it the P word, we try not to talk about it. It didn't really exist. He had already done this in his mind and, frankly, in his heart before he even stepped up to the line to shoot that gold medal end, that last end that awarded him the most prestigious award in all of archery. And, but then what do you do after that? So if the process of getting there and the entire drive of becoming that champion doesn't satisfy you, and it's only that result, you're going to, struggle at some point in time if you don't find that, what's the word? Help me out here. That marriage of enjoyment of the process versus trying to obtain the result. Does that sound right?
Yeah. And I think it's important to add something, though, because I think often it's talked about in a sense that it's like, oh, well, it'll get you there, but then what happens after? And then in my head, I'm like, I don't care what happens after, right? Like, I mean, that's how I was in that. I was like, I don't care. Like, give me the Olympic gold medal, then I'm good. That's the whole mindset. But the thing that needs to be communicated is that is fragile. You're more likely to get the Olympic gold medal if you can live in neutrality, curiosity, and courage as you're going through the journey. That isn't fragile. There's no margin between your actions and what's rooted internally. So that's the message I think the world really does need to hear, is using scarcity motivation works, but it's more fragile than neutrality, curiosity, and courage. That will get you there, it will keep you there, and it'll have a positive impact on everything else you do in your life. That was always the thing I struggled with, I was like, well, the scarcity will get me there more aggressively and faster. Nobody ever told me it's weak. And I felt it. I watch it happen in gymnastics all the time. You win, you feel the heat, you either go down or you figure out that I'm just here for the ride. Let's see what happens. Curiosity. And it's two direct different angles. I watch it happen in athletes all the time. I'll be like, oh, I wonder which, I like see them win. I'm like, all right, the heat's coming in 3 months. I wonder in 3 months if they're going down or going up. And that's how we know what happens with them. So it's a huge deal.
Yeah. So along the way, Brandon, what was the best or the most help you got from a coach?
Good question. The most help I got from a coach was a coach that I had a good relationship with. So I'm pretty vocal about this now, that I think it's pretty naive and almost a ridiculous concept to think that coaching is you taking your technical ideas and installing them in another individual for high performance. It's such a ridiculous idea, in my personal humble opinion, that you think that your personal opinion of a technical technique can be installed in another person. So when I was coached the best, it's because I had an incredible relationship with a person that was going on the journey with me. And that was it. And that was the last coach that I had for the last 10 years, was somebody that was my family member. He's family to me now. And I had that strong personal relationship, and he figured out how to guide me instead of forcefully instruct me. And when I talk to a lot of junior coaches in the gymnastics community, I see the duality there as well. They think that they're going to tell the guy to lift his left elbow and that's going to make him win the Olympics. Maybe that guy doesn't need to lift his left elbow. And it's really ego driven to think that you must know better than the natural construction of that individual. So that's my take on that.
Yeah, instead of making you do it, he helped you choose to do it.
Yeah, and helped me choose the right way to do it for me. Huge.
Or help you find the right way to do it for you, because it's not necessarily that my way is going to work for every single shooter, but I might have enough knowledge to help you find your path that maybe goes and might veer. It's just a tributary of getting to the goal, right? It just your tributary might take a different little bit of path to still get you where you're trying to go.
So
I think that's why
a good coach athlete relationship would require that both have good ears.
Yes, definitely. Very much so. And taking on the role of a guide. I think the functional word being a guide.
Yeah, guide. Okay.
Yeah, mentor. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. A few days ago, and this is what initiated the having Brandon and Lorraine on, because it was a right opportunity to do it. I called Brandon just to congratulate him on not being in the Olympics. In a way, I told him I was so surprised that he was actually going to give it another shot. And then we talked about this, and I found out that he's trying. He is developing and has already put some of the pieces together to have an organization that can help young people be coached and mentored, if you will. I always use the mentoring coach, who can teach process, who can teach steps, and there's certain ways to do things, especially when you're handling sports that can be dangerous. Not everyone has to learn how to completely do that from Jump Street. They can learn some things to be safe, and then they can do the modifications. So we were talking about that, and I'm working on something very similar too. There are programs around, like in archery. I'm sure that almost every sports there's the midgets, football, and all the sports start people from early on. Similar to there are.
You're good.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
That was an echo here, I guess.
Yeah, there was a quick.
Pretty scary when you hear yourself talk, but anyhow, so the idea is to make available not only technique and process, but people who can encourage people to develop their own relationship within themselves and see themselves as worthy people. And I'm not saying you don't ever have to have the right outcome. Rather, income helps with outcome, certainly to buy it, but you do need to have the courage. And there's, I think it was Toyota on the Olympics had that really good commercial about really being there, showing up and to do your sport instead of trying to become the sport. And so hopefully working together, we can take groups such as not only JOAD, but the National Archery in Schools program or midget football. I remember years ago being at one of my grandson's midget football games. It got cold, it was pouring down rain, it was getting dark. And a mother came over and handed a blanket to her son who was sitting there on the stands like this, shivering. And the coach came over and grabbed that blanket from her and ripped it out of her hand. They said, "I don't want these kids to be sissies." I mean, the kid's shaking to death, almost freezing. Mother's just being a mother and protecting. That very game, the coaches got in such a hassle with each other, the police were called. Now that's how to train your kids, right? We're talking about something quite different here. And I find it exciting to be part of it and to be again in contact with people that I care for dearly. And these two guys up here, Larry Wise and Frank McDonough, and a couple other people in archery have just been wonderful people to work with because they really believe in what they do, and they had so many people turn out like yourself, Brandon, who now can translate that into not only a business, but something you love to do that does well for you financially, I'm sure, but also helps many, many, many people.
Yeah. Yep. Nailed it.
That's the end of my sermon. We can pass the plate and go home, I guess.
We can, and we can sort of, kind of segue out. I do want to get a little bit of, I want to talk with Brandon a little bit, at least while we're on live, just about the comparison I've seen in the archer world, the comparison between the twisties. So I'm sure to target panic and archery. And well, I personally don't feel they're exactly the same, but have you ever gotten the twisties, Brandon? Do you know what that is? I mean, obviously
yes,
it is, but can you speak to that a little bit in regards to how that affects you on a performance wise and what that result is? Because there's a lot of discussion in archery, and I see it on social media, and people talk about that, about like what target panic is. And just for your edification, I don't know if you know what target panic is. Just it's a mental break that doesn't allow you to execute the shot correctly, and it can literally take over your physical ability to not shoot a bow. Like at its worst, you literally can't even pull a bow back. Can you talk to that a little bit, and then how that can have how that can hurt you from a performance and just like a mental health basis?
Yeah, I think so. For an example, and maybe to start, the twisties, it's it's really hard to describe. A lot of people think that it might have to do with inner ear stuff, balance. But for me, my understanding of what it is in my experience is you forgetting the actions that you take that make you do the skill because it's just become so second nature. So your body's almost taken over because you've done the skill so much. And then when you go to initiate the action, you don't really remember how to initiate it anymore. You're doing so many skills that are so similar to it. You forget how to differentiate because you're not really being conscious when you do the skills. We're training to almost be unconscious through the physical process of gymnastics to create consistency. And that in itself is kind of a problem. So you'll go to do the skill and you just can't do it anymore. You forget how to do it. And then typically you'll walk back and then go do it in a safer environment like a pit. You do it once successfully and then you remind yourself, oh, that's how I do it. And then you can take it back out. So that's typically what happens with the twisties. As far as what's the term? Target
panic.
Yeah,
it's a very popular topic. Go ahead. What'd you say, Larry?
Yeah, it comes in several forms. One form is a person, usually with a mechanical release aid, begins aiming on the target and instantly punches the trigger on the release. Instead of working through loading the back in a smooth process. It exacerbates itself then in an instantaneous release as soon as the target comes into view. Other people acquire a freezing syndrome. And so they begin aiming and the sight pin freezes below the target usually. And they can't get it up on the target. They're frozen. And both psychological and usually come from a focus on results. And not on process in the present. They have a fear of getting a bad result, or they want the result right now and punch the trigger.
Something similar.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to refer to Barebow. Barebow is a little bit different because we are forced to deal with target panic directly because we don't have release aids. We don't have draw checks. We don't have anything that says, go ahead, it's time to let go. So what we have to do is we have to find a good full draw position. We have to settle the tip of the arrow in the middle of the target. And then we have to internally control or allow that subconscious switch to happen that allows you to effectively let go of the arrow. So, and you were sort of speaking to it where in the twisties, like subconsciously you've done the movements so many times that your body and your mind just naturally knows what the feel is supposed to be so that you can repeat the movement. And in target panic, we go into that mode as well. The problem is that doing it entirely subconsciously, you just you get anywhere near the target and you're letting go. You're just training yourself to, without having conscious mind involved, you end up just, it comes out in Barebow, it comes out in drive-by where you kind of like try to time the aim with the release and it gets to the middle and you let go. There's people who also they can aim all day long, but they cannot let go of the string. So they just shake uncontrollably. Similar to what Larry said, you get stuck below. You're not able to get the actual aim to happen because you're anticipating the release happening. You're trying not to let go. So you get stuck because you are thinking about the future and not in the present. So just on the archery side to compare, but please elaborate further on what we were talking about there.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this is just rooted in this deeper fear of an unfavorable outcome. That's what all this stuff is, right? It's even if you can't consciously understand that's what's going on, deep down inside, you think there's a potential for an unfavorable outcome. Therefore, you can't even take the action because you're just so fearful of that. And there's freezing in gymnastics as well. Like you go to do the skill, you stop, you go to do the skill, you stop. And maybe in gymnastics, there's two pieces. You don't want to not do it successfully. And then you also might be fearful of any kind of physical injury. But again, I think it all comes back to the same thing. And not to go so macro, But when you have the ability to be a witness and an observer of what's going on internally, you find yourself clinging to attaching to needing to create this outcome over and over and over again, and you practice that need, it gets sticky. And you need to clear daily that I'm here for the ride. I'm neutral to whatever happens. I'm curious about how whatever is about to happen to me is going to build my life into something I never anticipated. And I can't wait to see how this unfolds. And when you live in that energy, I feel like it solves the majority of these problems. So for not knowing and not seeing exactly what's going on there, I feel very confident it's deeply rooted in the fear of an unfavorable outcome.
Yeah, good. No, that's a great response, and it's nice to. I think one of the reasons I wanted to bring it up is because when you get caught with that fear, it can have a mental strain on you because you feel the necessity to perform, and that's literally the cause of the problem, is the necessity to perform, and then you get stuck in a rut. And it just keeps happening. And until you literally walk, like you were talking about, how you scale it back, you go do it in a safer environment, you do it into a pit, or with, the aid of coaches, whatever the situation is. And it's similar in archery with target panic. You step back to a more comfortable, controlled environment. And what we do, in our world, that's called blind bail or blank bail, or shooting at a closer distance, where you feel technically the control hasn't changed, just the environment and the environment that you're in has changed. So it's good to have that comparison to another sport and realize that there is definitely the difference is in target panic, your life isn't in any danger. The twisties 10 feet in the air, your life is in danger if you are not able to get that back, But it's good to have that comparison, understand that it's in multiple sports. It's definitely performance related.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I think naturally as humans, we always cling to predictability, right? We're looking for predictability because when we can predict something, we're less likely to be in danger. I think it's just human nature to find that predictability. So our body is constantly making conscious processes unconscious. It is the process of being a human being. So we do that naturally, and it's a safety mechanism for our survival as animals. So we have to find this balance, and again, melting that duality of being able to rely on unconscious practice, the physical practice unconscious, but then having the presence to kind of scrape it off every single day and still keep it fresh and keep it real, and then keep yourself in the moment. So it's definitely a practice, comes back to witness of your internal state and observing what's going on and being able to be in touch with that. That's the mechanism that makes us successful in that.
Awesome. Thanks for that dialogue. Appreciate it.
Great summary of that too. And it's exciting on our program here. We've had this going now for about a year and a half now. We decided to set this type of venue up to provide overall information about archery, very much like a university kind of thing, and to provide the experiences of people with that, in order to provide, in a sense, a mentoring to this. Here are all the facts, but this is how I did it. I mean, you're free to go and make your changes to it too, and do it in your way. And this really creates good growth with people. And over the summer, we've only been doing the coach cast. Soon we're going to be starting courses again. This sounds like an advertisement for the group here, and maybe it is in a way. But we're going to be offering the various courses that we've already taught before in archery and so forth, and then coaching. And there's level of achievement with those, and certification and so forth. But it's this kind of a venue that now, especially that we're able to provide things virtually, and then we've been able to work with people literally around the world, and it's really enjoyable to be part of that, and to realize it can be part of the successful growth and achievement of individuals. And I really thank the two of you for coming on. It's great to see you guys again. And
you as well. This was fun.
Before we cut out, though, we do have some comments and questions. If we can just address a couple of those real quick, if that's okay.
I have about 5 minutes.
All right. Well, let's try to do this real quick. So Ryan Houts, who is a parent of a young lady, shoots Olympic recurve and happened to win the Junior Olympic Archery Development National Championship for outdoors in her class. He said he saw a trailer for the Venus and Serena movie, and their dad had their careers planned out before they were born. He said, not that I plan to go that path, his child's already competing, but I wonder who else that has worked for successfully. Do you have any comment in regards to being that organized in your children's future before they are even? I think that's in my personal opinion, I think that's a rare story, but that's just
yeah, very rare. I already said what I told both my kids. You don't have to shoot archery to please me, but whatever pleases you, I'll help you do.
Yeah.
And how do you define success?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. How do you define success as a parent? Yeah. If your goal is to throw as much money as necessary and expose them to every little thing, I think in some ways, maybe the Williams family got lucky.
Well, are they truly successful? Are they truly all that they are?
Are they truly that happy as well?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's good. We have another one real quick. How do you manage the line between having fun and pushing for performance? Lorraine, why don't you comment on a parent's outlook on that one?
Okay, so it's the parent having fun and pushing their child for performance.
I think it's referencing the athlete having fun and you pushing for performance is the way I'm taking the comment, which is probably the most common thing that I see from parents in youth sports. I can go up the street here to the Little League field and watch it just about every night that they play. But should parents push for performance? I think let's answer that first.
No, I don't believe parents should push for performance. What parents should, and push isn't really the right word, but what the parent's goal is to assist their kid in being who they are, whatever that happens to mean. So you observe your child, you learn from your child, and you are the stage from which they can express who they are from. And have fun every second of the way. I think we pretty much did.
Winners have fun.
Right.
Winners do have fun. Yeah, bottom line. Yep, bottom line.
Even if they don't know they're having fun, they're like, oh, this is so hard. It's like, dude, you love this. Come on. We all know you love this.
Exactly. Every bit of it.
Yeah.
All right. That was it. I mean, there's some other comments. I encourage you guys to go back and maybe read through them. They took a lot of your quotes and just Ryan specifically commented a few times, was taking some of what you were saying, and I think it's resonating with him as a parent of a very talented young archer. And I know Ryan, I talked to Ryan personally out at nationals, and because he was asking me about coaching, and I said, I actually referred him to Jay Bars, ironically, but there in his area, there's coaches galore, like Virginia Beach for gymnastics. There's gyms everywhere. There's pockets in the world, and he's in one of those pockets where Olympic recurve is huge. There's coaches everywhere. And I kind of said to him the same thing about, you got to find a coach that works best for you, not just because they happen to have a resume. And you need to cultivate the right atmosphere for your shooter. But anyway, all right, Brand, I know you are short on time. Thank you so much for joining us. Lorraine,
thanks so much.
It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. It's been
we may have to do this again over some other stuff because this is very good.
Yeah, let's do it.
We'll continue our talking, Brandon.
Yeah, sounds good. I will see you guys soon.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Wonderful.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you,
On
Brandon.
Facebook. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Lorraine.